Hey YouTube. I wanted to make this video because I've come across a lot of people's different videos, and a common question that people have is regarding the person's video, their stretching methods, or how long it took them to stretch from one side to the next. And it's certainly not a problem, but the one theme that I see in a lot of other people's videos is that they tend to mention a lot of bad advice, and while it may have necessarily worked for them, it's really not good advice. It's kind of like, oh, I've stolen from this store such and such times, you can still just do it this way, but, you could be that person caught and prosecuted by the cops. So weird analogy, but anyways, I wanted to make this video to kind of be a resource with not, more helpful information so that you don't end up messing up your ears, because you only have one set of ears, and if you mess these up, then there's no redo. You can't grow in a new pair like you can hair. So the first tip that I wanted to leave is I strongly advocate stretching your ears yourself as opposed to going to a piercing shop to get it done. The first reason why is because a piercer can't really feel what you're feeling as your ears being stretched, whereas you can feel as a taper. If you're stretching your ear yourself, for example, you can kind of feel if your ear is getting really tender, or if you're feeling pain, that maybe I need to back off. It's not time. I need to take more time before I go up to the next size. A piercer, unless he's really attentive, will not notice this and keep stretching your ear, and doing that over time definitely does not lead to good ear health at all. It leads to cat butt, it leads to blowouts, it leads to a lot of problems. So that's my first tip. If you're interested in stretching, I strongly recommend giving stretching a try on your own. Um, the second thing I want to lead to is things that you use to stretch your ears with. There are a couple different methods. Some methods, like one method that's really common, is stretching using tapers. Tapers are the cone-shaped jewelry. Let me see. They're like this. This is an acrylic taper, but it's a common method that people use to stretch their ears with. It's not necessarily a bad method, especially at smaller sizes. One thing I will recommend is that if let's say you're going from 8 gauge to 6 gauge, and you're having a tough time with it, and the taper seems too thick, I would strongly recommend trying out longer tapers. One website that sells longer tapers is Body Art Forms, bodyartforms.com, and they sell tapers that are actually about, I want to say about 3 inches long, and they're more gradual, so it's easier on your ear if it's a little too steep of a change using regular acrylic tapers. Um, Another method that people use is weights to stretch their ears. I don't personally recommend using weights, just because weights can lead to uneven stretching, and when you stretch unevenly, you really run the risk of having thinned out ears. And if you keep stretching on thinned out ears, you run the risk of actually snapping your earlobe. And again, you only have one set of earlobes. Do it right. There's no do-overs really for that. The last method that is pretty common is actually using tape. I don't really recommend using electrical tape just because of the adhesive that's on electrical tape, but some people have success using PFTE tape, and a lot of people nowadays use bondage tape. I personally have used bondage tape with good results. The only thing is that if you do use that method, I would say to use oils, because your ears tend to get dried out. But I would say taping or tapers are pretty decent methods. I would say more along the lines of tapering isn't bad at smaller sizes, and I would say to use tape as you get into larger sizes to kind of make the transition between the two. I'd say maybe taper is really up to make 0, maybe double 0, and tape past that. That's personally what I did, but I mean, just exercise caution in both methods, really. The next point I wanted to get to is the use of acrylic. Acrylic in tapers, I personally didn't really have a problem with it, and it's provided that you're not using the acrylic taper as actual jewelry to keep in your ear. I don't really see it as a bad method. But if you're stretching your ears, I strongly, strongly, strongly recommend you not let your ears heal with acrylic in them, just because acrylic is a porous material and it harbors bacteria, which definitely isn't good for a healing piercing, which essentially is what your ear is doing as you're stretching. It's a healing piercing. Um, no acrylic. If you're not sure what else to use, I strongly advocate using either glass or steel or titanium. Um, Again, the website that I mentioned before, Body Art Forms, they have a poor person stretching kit where they give you an acrylic taper and steel plugs, and it's really cheap. It's something like $5, I think, $5 or $6. I'll leave a link to it in the comments, and you can check that out if you need something quick, but you don't really have a lot of money. There are other better alternatives, but if you want to stretch and you don't really have a lot of money, that's personally what I would recommend doing. But again, no acrylic. Use either glass or steel or titanium. Um, and with that, don't use tapers as jewelry. It's not a good idea. It's really, really not. The extra weight of the taper really isn't good for a healing piercing. Once again, stretch with the taper if you must, and then put actual jewelry in. Don't keep tapers in as jewelry. I've seen a lot of people do that on YouTube. It's not a good idea, I swear. Another thing that I've seen people do a lot is that they will buy jewelry from Chaos. Chaos makes eyelets and ear skins and attempt to stretch their ears with that. I strongly, 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 strongly recommend that you do not do that. Just because if the silicone sticks to your ear, you can actually rip out the skin on the inside of your ear, the fistula, which will not only damage your ears, but I've heard is really painful and it looks terrible. Do not stretch with silicone. I know people on YouTube have done it, but it's really not a good idea. It's very ugly. Don't do it. Don't do it. Um, One another thing that I would recommend doing is moisturizing your ears. I like to use Naked Oil. Um, I don't have the bottle with me. It's actually at home. I'm on campus. I like to use that, and I also like to use a product by Burt's Bees. It's actually a hand salve like this, but I found that it works out really well for my earlobes. I don't recommend using it on new piercings, but for well-heeled lobes, I find that it works out really nice for me. But I'm sorry, I'm trying to go through these songs while filming this. But yes, I would say moisturize your ear. There are a lot of things you could use. You have vitamin E oil, you have jojoba oil, you have a lot of different oils that you can use. Just experiment and find something that works nice with your ears and stick to it. If you find something nice, stick with it. Kind of like shampoo. You find a good shampoo, you stick with it. But another good tip, don't race. It's not a race. It's not a race between you and your buddies to say, oh, I'm going to make it to 00 before prom. Don't race. Listen to your ears and find out what works well for you and stick with it. If you find that a month between, let's say, 10 gauge and 8 gauge is enough for you, is enough time, then by all means stick to it. But if you find that a month is not enough time, don't just jump to the next size. It's not worth messing up your ears in the long run for. It's definitely not worth doing. So just take your time. Um, and also, one thing I see people say is that, oh, I'm only going to stretch to 2 gauge or 0 gauge because my ears will go back to normal. That is one of the biggest misconceptions that people have about stretched ears. That point of no return really depends on the person. I've seen people that have stretched their ears to almost a ½ inch and gone back to pretty normal lobes, whereas I've seen people that have stretched to only 6 gauge and have not gone back to normal lobes. It really depends on your personal genetics and your ear tissue. Well, for some people, zero gauge might be the point where they can go back to normal lobes. It's not the standard for every person. A lot of people have stretched and taken the plugs out only to find out that they don't have regular 18 gauge holes anymore. So don't go into stretching if you think that's going to be your alternative, because it definitely might not be. Um, I don't know. These are just a few things that came to mind, but if you have any questions, I'm definitely open to help. So if you are curious about any facets about stretching, just leave me a comment. I just tried to cover a few things that I've seen a lot, but just ask if you're not sure. I'm definitely open to help. So just let me know, and good luck with stretching your ears, guys. I wish everybody the best lobe health, and it's definitely a fun experience. So do it right. You'll have awesome lobes to thank you at the end of it. This has been Ellie Yeoman, and thank you for watching. Peace.